Hey guys, it's Henry here again, and welcome back to another episode of Apparel Academy. In this episode, we're going to talk all about digitizing and whether you should do it in-house or outsource it to someone else. We'll be talking about the pros and cons of each and how you can make an informed decision for your business. Alright, so before we get started, make sure to smash that like button if you enjoy content like this and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can keep up to date with the latest videos and new content that we put out every single week. As you saw with a lot of our other episodes in this podcast series, we talked about a lot of different technologies within the customization world and how you can utilize that to grow your business, so definitely stay tuned for more content like that. So before diving into the pros and cons of doing digitizing in-house versus outsourcing it, we want to first set the context for what is digitizing if you don't know what that is. Digitizing is simply the process of turning a vector file or a design into a digitized format that an embroidery machine can actually read and therefore stitch out. On average, full-blown professional digitizing software on the market will typically range from $2,000 and up. However, one of the great things that we offer here at Ricoma is including our own digitizing software called Chroma and including the entry-level tier called Chroma Inspire into our embroidery machine packages, so you can really get started learning about digitizing for absolutely free of charge. You can actually download a free trial of the Chroma software in the description below, where you can play around with the interface and see how the look and feel of the software is before you buy it. When offering digitizing as a service, people usually charge their fees in one of three ways. So the first method of charging for digitizing is simply a flat rate. Flat rate pricing for digitizing services actually is very simple because it does not vary and is usually just dependent on placement and size. For example, a typical left chest polo logo can be charged for about $10 if you decide to digitize it. That is because the placement is on the left chest and usually the design wouldn't expand beyond that and therefore isn't going to be too complex. A second method that a lot of digitizers use to price for their services is by stitch count. So typically, digitizers can charge about $1.50 per 1,000 stitches. So for example, a left chest logo that is being digitized for $10 is typically around 6,000 to 7,000 stitches, ends up being about $9 to $10. Finally, the last method that digitizers use to charge for their services is by complexity. This is different than a flat fee and from stitch count because it can't really encompass the complexity of the design using those two methods. This method really requires a lot more knowledge and experience from the digitizer because he or she needs to know how complex of a design is and how much work it's going to take simply by looking at the design. So now that you know what digitizing is and the typical ways that you charge for digitizing services, let's look at the pros and cons of doing digitizing in-house on your own versus outsourcing it to someone else. So let's start with the pros of doing it in-house on your own. Obviously, one of the first pros is you don't have to pay someone else to do it. You can keep all of that profit margin in-house instead of paying it out to someone else to do the work for you. A second pro to that is you have full control over the entire digitizing process. Because you're doing it in-house and on your own, you actually control the quality of it and actually saves you time from going back and forth with a third party or an outsourced digitizer if the design doesn't turn out right. You also might spend less time testing the actual design because you know the quality of your work instead of trusting someone else to do it and having to test the design, and if it doesn't turn out well, have to go back and tell them all the changes. Another pro to this approach is also you control not only the quality, but also the turnaround time. So instead of relying on someone else where you don't know their pipeline of work and have no visibility into their workload, they might deprioritize your work order and might not be able to get around to your design until much later if they have other orders already in line. Versus if you do it in-house on your own, you're in full control of the entire process and you can determine when you get to that design and what is the turnaround time that you want to set for your client. Finally, obviously this is a separate skill than just embroidery itself, so learning it is also a pro that can add a lot more value to your customers and actually grow a separate revenue stream to your business that you can actually profit from if you learn digitizing and learn it well. Now let's move on to the pros of outsourcing digitizing to someone else who is a professional digitizer that's able to do the work for you. Now, one of the first and most obvious pros of this approach is obviously not having to learn the software yourself and actually just outsource it to someone else who is a professional. That way, you don't have to climb the learning curve of the software and just focus on the craft of embroidery and perfecting that. Another pro is obviously some of the cost savings that comes with not having to invest in a professional digitizing software. Not only do you not have to climb the learning curve of learning the software, you also don't have to upgrade a software that comes with your machine package if you're not looking to do the digitizing in-house on your own. That can definitely save you some cost, but also keep it in mind, one of the cons of doing that is you won't be able to have that revenue stream coming in for design services that you might be able to charge for your customers. Finally, another pro to outsourcing your digitizing is that it's actually pretty affordable to outsource to someone else. For example, a left chest logo, as I mentioned before, can be $10 to $15, and that's pretty affordable compared to other design services. However, just know that those are typical left chest logo digitizing prices, and if your design gets more complex, those prices could potentially go up. And if your niche is focusing on these more complex designs for your customers, those costs can also add up over time. So that's also another con that you have to consider as you pay for these designs outsourced. Those costs tend to add up, and over time, especially over the course of several months or several years, that can actually equate to you actually buying a full-blown digitizing software. Now, obviously, your time is also a factor, so if you don't have the time to learn it, then obviously don't do that in-house, or if you want to just focus on the craft of embroidery first, definitely start with outsourcing. So now that we went over some of the pros and cons of doing digitizing in-house versus outsourcing to someone else, let me give you some considerations if you decide to choose either route. First off, if you're considering doing digitizing in-house, this might be a good route for you if you have a good understanding and grasp of digitizing software, or you have previous design experience with other software that can allow you to climb that learning curve much faster than if you didn't have that prior experience. Also, if you're looking to bring digitizing in-house, always remember that we always recommend to learn the craft of embroidery first, because that's the actual product that you'll be giving to your customer. You can always outsource digitizing and come back to it later. If you're already familiar with embroidery and you have that down packed, and you also have your marketing and sales in order, you might consider taking the extra time to learn a new skill that can be an additional revenue driver for you in digitizing. If you're considering outsourcing your digitizing, here are some things that you should consider as well. Make sure that you quote-unquote test your digitizer before working with them long-term. Because there are so many digitizers out there of various experience and quality, you want to make sure that you hone in on their skill set and make sure that you can work with them very well and that they can meet your deadlines and requirements. This is one of the biggest pitfalls of outsourcing your digitizing, because again, one of the cons is you don't have full control over the process. So without knowing the quality and without someone that you can trust, it will be difficult and it might take some time to actually find that perfect digitizer that's willing to work with you and can be consistent on a regular basis. Another thing to consider is having an agreement in place or making sure of the terms that your digitizer sets in terms of revisions to your design. One final consideration to keep in mind is you really need to know how to price your items properly so you build in the cost of outsourcing to someone else. I actually have another video on YouTube on that regarding setup fees and other types of add-on fees and how to structure that properly within your services and your products. So if you're interested to check that out, make sure to check that out in the card above, or I've linked it in the description below. All right, guys, that's it for us for today. I hope you found that helpful. Make sure to smash that like button if you haven't done so already, to give a quick thumbs up to this video. That will really greatly help out this channel. Also, comment below what you currently do in your embroidery business, whether you outsource your digitizing or you do it in-house, and why you chose that way. Also, I want to remind you to join our free Facebook group, Embroidery and Custom Apparel Mastery, if you haven't done so already. There's now over 18,000 people in there sharing tips, tricks, and their knowledge of the apparel decoration space. Also, follow us on Instagram at Ricoma HQ. We actually post there daily, so you can be a part of the conversation there, and check out the latest trends in the world of custom apparel. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you found this information helpful, and see you guys next time.